The Chamber of Stars was the most beautiful place in the known galaxy. It floated at the center of the Nexus Station, a massive structure built where three spiral arms of the galaxy met. The chamber itself was a perfect sphere made of crystal, so clear that the stars themselves seemed close enough to touch. Representatives from 12 different species gathered here to discuss the fate of civilizations. They called themselves the Galactic Council, and for 10,000 years, they had ruled over known space with wisdom and careful diplomacy. Councilor Vethril of the Kethari Dominion stood at his designated platform, his forearms folded across his chest in the traditional posture of patience. His species resembled what humans might call insects, though such a comparison would have deeply offended him. The Kethari were ancient and proud. They had built starships when most species were still learning to use fire. Their compound eyes could see in spectrums that other species could not even imagine, and their minds worked with cold, precise logic. Today's session was supposed to be routine. Trade agreements, border disputes, the usual matters that kept the galaxy running smoothly. Vethril was already planning his evening meal when the emergency signal cut through the chamber like a blade. Every light in the sphere turned red. A sound that most species had never heard before echoed through the space. It was the alarm that signaled a threat to Council security. In 300 years, it had only sounded twice. High Arbiter Sullen of the Veth Collective rose from her platform. She was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and eyes that held no pupils. Her species communicated through a combination of speech and telepathy, and when she spoke, her words carried weight that pressed against the minds of everyone present. What is the meaning of this interruption? She demanded. The answer came from the center of the chamber, where a holographic display flickered to life. The image showed a star map of the outer regions. A single red dot was moving through space, crossing boundaries that had been established long before most of the species present had achieved. SPACEF LIGHT. Intelligence Director Kethmos stepped forward. He was Kethari, like Vethril, but older, his carapace marked with the scars of a lifetime spent uncovering secrets. His voice was calm, but those who knew him well could detect the slight tremor beneath his words. 43 hours ago, our long-range sensor network detected an anomaly in Sector 7. At first, we believed it to be a natural phenomenon. A rogue asteroid, perhaps, or debris from a collapsed star. He paused, and the holographic display zoomed in on the red dot. We were wrong. The image resolved into something that made several counselors gasp. It was a ship, but calling it a ship seemed inadequate, like calling an ocean a puddle of water. The vessel was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the largest council dreadnought. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, and it bristled with structures that the council's computers could not identify. Some looked like weapons. Others looked like sensors. Many looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. What species built this? Councilor Vethril asked, his voice sharp with concern. Kethmos hesitated. It was a small pause, barely noticeable, but it told Vethril everything he needed to know. Whatever answer was coming, it would not be welcome. The vessel originated from the Sol system, Kethmos said finally. It was built by the species known as humans. Silence fell over the chamber. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm, heavy and full of tension. Every counselor knew about humans. They were one of hundreds of primitive species that the council monitored from a distance, waiting for them to develop enough to be worth contacting. The humans had been interesting in a morbid sort of way. They fought constantly among themselves. They destroyed their own environment. They had come close to extinction several times through their own foolishness, but they were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to be contained in their little corner of the galaxy, struggling to figure out basic interstellar travel. They were not supposed to be capable of building something like this. "That is impossible," said Council of Ren of the Silithian Empire. His species were large and powerful, covered in scales that could deflect most weapons. They had conquered half a spiral arm before the Council had forced them to accept peace. Ren was not easily frightened, but even his voice carried a note of uncertainty. The humans achieved faster-than-light travel only decades ago. They cannot have built a vessel of this size and complexity in such a short time. And yet, Kethmos replied, "The evidence is before you." The holographic display expanded, showing detailed scans of the approaching ship. The data streams were filled with question marks and error messages. The Council's most advanced sensors could not fully analyze what they were seeing. "We have identified some of the external structures," Kethmos continued. "These appear to be weapon systems." He highlighted several sections of the hull. Kinetic accelerators capable of firing solid projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Missile launchers containing warheads that our sensors indicate are fusion-based. Point defense systems covering nearly the entire surface of the hull. He paused again. And this. A section near the center of the ship glowed bright on the display. Even through the hologram, the counselors could sense the power emanating from it. "We do not know what this is," Kethmos admitted. "Our best scientists believe it may be some form of contained stellar reaction. A miniature sun, powering systems that we cannot identify or understand." Counselor Vethrol felt his heart beating faster. The Cathari had two hearts, a biological redundancy that had served them well through millions of years of evolution. Right now, both of them were pounding with fear. "What is the vessel's heading?" he asked. Kethmos looked at him with an expression that might have been sympathy. "It is heading directly for Council space. At its current speed, it will reach the nexus point in approximately 72 hours. The chamber erupted. Counselors shouted over each other, demanding answers, proposing actions, expressing fears that had been dormant for centuries. The Galactic Council had not faced a true military threat in generations. They had grown comfortable with their power, confident that no species could challenge their authority. Now, a single ship from a species they had dismissed as primitive was forcing them to confront an uncomfortable truth. They were not as invincible as they had believed. High Arbiter Solon raised her hand, and a wave of telepathic calm washed over the chamber. The shouting stopped, though the fear remained. "We must approach this situation with logic and wisdom," she said. "Let us not assume the worst. Perhaps this vessel comes in peace." "In peace?" Council of Ren laughed, though there was no humor in the sound. "Look at it. That is not a diplomatic vessel. That is not an exploration ship. That is a weapon pointed directly at us." "We do not know the humans' intentions," Solon replied. "We have never made formal contact with their species. Perhaps this is simply how they build their ships. Perhaps they do not know our customs and protocols." Vethrol shook his head. "No species builds a vessel like that without understanding what it represents. The humans know exactly what they are doing. The question is why." He turned to Kethmos. "What do we know about this vessel specifically? Does it have a designation?" Kethmos consulted his data tablet. "Our intercepts of human communications suggest they call it the Prometheus. They classify it as a Titan-class warship." He looked up. "It appears to be the first of its kind." "The first?" Ren repeated. "You mean they are building more?" "Unknown. But the infrastructure required to construct a vessel of this size suggests significant industrial capacity. If the humans can build one Titan-class ship, they can likely build more." The implications hung in the air like poison. One ship of this size was a crisis. A fleet of them would be a catastrophe. "We must send an envoy," Solon decided. "We must establish communication and determine their intentions before we take any military action. And if their intentions are hostile, Vran demanded. Selen's expression was grave. Then we will respond accordingly. But we will not fire the first shot. That is not who we are. The debate continued for hours. Some counselors wanted to attack immediately, destroying the human vessel before it could reach populated space. Others argued for diplomacy, insisting that the council's strength came from wisdom, not violence. A few suggested simply evacuating the nexus point, retreating to safer positions until more information could be gathered. In the end, they reached a compromise. A diplomatic envoy would be sent to intercept the Prometheus and establish communication. At the same time, the Council would begin mobilizing its military forces. If diplomacy failed, they would be ready. Councillor Vethrol volunteered to lead the diplomatic mission. He was not sure why. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was a sense of duty. Or perhaps it was simply that he wanted to see the human vessel with his own eyes, to understand what kind of species could create something so terrifying. His shuttle departed the Nexus station 3 hours later. It was a small ship, barely large enough for a crew of 10. Compared to the massive warships that were beginning to gather around the station, it looked like a toy. As they traveled toward the intercept point, Vethrol studied everything the Council had on file about humans. The information was sparse and often contradictory. The humans had achieved sentience relatively recently in galactic terms. They had developed technology at an unusual pace, leaping from primitive combustion engines to nuclear power in less than a century. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times through war and environmental damage. But they had survived. Again and again, they had survived. And now they were reaching for the stars. The most troubling data came from their history. The humans had fought wars on a scale that shocked even the Silithians. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, and had actually used some of them against each other. Their literature and art were filled with violence and conflict, but also with strange concepts like hope and redemption. They seemed to believe that they could become better, even as they repeatedly proved themselves capable of terrible things. Vethrol did not know what to make of them. They were a contradiction, a species that built beautiful things and destroyed them with equal enthusiasm. They were dangerous, certainly. But were they evil? His shuttle dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the designated intercept point. For a moment, the sensors showed nothing but empty space. Then, the Prometheus emerged from the darkness, and Vethrol understood why his fellow counselors had been so afraid. Pictures did not do it justice. The human ship was massive, yes, but it was also beautiful in a brutal sort of way. Every line of its hull spoke of purpose. Every weapon emplacement was positioned with mathematical precision. This was not a ship designed by committee or built to impress. This was a ship designed to win. Vethrol opened a communication channel. Human vessel Prometheus. This is Counselor Vethrol of the Galactic Council. We come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic relations. Please respond. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a voice came through the speakers. It was female, calm and controlled, speaking in a language that the universal translator converted to Cathari with only slight hesitation. Counselor Vethrol, this is Captain Helena Vance of the Earth vessel Prometheus. We acknowledge your transmission. We are prepared to discuss diplomatic relations. Vethrol felt a small measure of relief. At least they were willing to talk. Captain Vance, I must inform you that your current heading will take you into restricted space. The Galactic Council requests that you alter course and proceed to a designated meeting point where formal negotiations can take place. There was a pause before the captain responded. Counselor, we appreciate the invitation. However, we will not be altering course. We have business in council space, and we intend to conduct it. Vethrol's relief evaporated. Captain, I must advise you that unauthorized entry into Council space is a serious violation of galactic law. The consequences could be severe. We are aware of your laws, Captain Vance replied. We are also aware that your council has monitored our species for nearly a century without making contact. You watched us struggle. You watched us suffer. You watched us nearly destroy ourselves. And you did nothing. Her voice remained calm, but there was an edge beneath the words. So you will forgive us if we do not feel particularly bound by your rules. Vethril did not know how to respond. The humans knew they had been watched. They knew the council had chosen not to intervene in their development, and they were angry about it. Captain, whatever grievances your species may have, surely they can be addressed through proper diplomatic channels. Violence will not solve anything. We agree, the captain said. That is why we have not fired on your shuttle, even though you are well within range of our weapons. We do not want violence, Counselor, but we will not be ignored. We will not be dismissed. And we will not be contained in our little corner of the galaxy while the rest of civilization pretends we do not exist. The communication ended. The Prometheus continued on its course, neither slowing nor changing direction. Vethril watched it pass his shuttle, close enough that he could see details of the hull with his own eyes. Up close, the ship was even more impressive and more terrifying. He turned his shuttle around and headed back to the Nexus station. The diplomatic mission had failed. Now, the Council would have to decide what to do next. As he traveled, Vethril could not shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The galaxy he had known, the comfortable order maintained by the Council for 10,000 years, was about to face a challenge unlike anything it had encountered before. The humans were coming, and they would not be stopped by treaties or traditions or the weight of ancient laws. They had built a warship as their introduction to the galaxy, and that choice told Vethril everything he needed to know about their intentions. They were not asking for permission to join the galactic community. They were announcing their arrival. And heaven help anyone who stood in their way. The news of Council of Vethril's failed diplomatic mission spread through the Nexus station like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every species with representation on the Council knew what had happened. The humans had refused to stop. They had refused to negotiate. They were coming, and nothing short of force would turn them back. High Arbiter Solon called for an emergency session of the full council. It was a rare event, requiring the physical presence of every senior representative from all 12 member species. Some had to travel for days to reach the Nexus station. Others were already present, having sensed that something significant was about to happen. By the time the session began, the Chamber of Stars was more crowded than it had been in living memory. Counselor Vethril stood at the center of the chamber, his compound eyes sweeping across the assembled representatives. He had not slept since returning from his encounter with the Prometheus. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the human ship looming in the darkness, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Fellow counselors, he began, I will not waste time with pleasantries. You all know why we are here. The human vessel Prometheus continues on its course toward Council space. My attempt at diplomatic contact was unsuccessful. The humans have made their intentions clear. They will not be deterred by words. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species expressed their anxiety through sound, others through color changes in their skin, still others through subtle shifts in their electromagnetic fields. The room was alive with fear. What exactly did they say? Asked Counselor Methrin of the Syndicate, a collective of aquatic species who lived in enormous ships filled with artificial oceans. His voice bubbled through the translator, wet and resonant. Were they threatening? Aggressive? Vethril considered the question carefully. Not in the way you might expect. The human captain was calm, controlled. She did not make specific threats, but she made it clear that the humans feel wronged by the Council. They know we have been watching them. They know we chose not to make contact. And they are angry. Angry? Councillor Vren snorted. The Silithian representative had been pacing at the edge of the chamber, his massive form casting shadows across the crystal walls. What right did they have to be angry? We followed proper protocol. We observe developing species until they are ready for contact. It is the law. Perhaps, Ethel replied, but from the human perspective, we abandoned them. We watched them suffer through wars and famines and disasters, and we did nothing to help. That is not our responsibility, Wren insisted. Every species must find its own path. We cannot interfere with natural development. And yet we do interfere, said a quiet voice from the far side of the chamber. All eyes turned to Councillor Yellen of the Miri Consensus. The Miri were small, delicate beings with luminous skin that changed color with their emotions. They were known for their wisdom and their reluctance to speak, unless they had something important to say. We interfere constantly. We control which species receive trading rights. We decide who is worthy of membership. We allow the Kithari to maintain their client worlds and the Silithians to keep their conquered territories. We are not neutral observers. We are rulers who pretend otherwise. The chamber fell silent. Yellen's words struck at a truth that many preferred to ignore. The Galactic Council spoke of equality and cooperation, but the reality was more complicated. Some species had more power than others. Some practices that should have been condemned were quietly tolerated. This is not the time for philosophical debates, High Arbiter Solen interjected. We face an immediate crisis. We must decide how to respond to the human approach. Intelligence Director Kethmos stepped forward, his data tablet glowing with information. Before we discuss military options, I believe the Council should understand exactly what we are dealing with. I have prepared a comprehensive briefing on human history and capabilities. He activated the central holographic display. Images began to appear, drawn from decades of observation and analysis. The councilors watched in fascinated horror as the story of humanity unfolded before them. Humans evolved on a planet called Earth, Kethmos began. It is a world of remarkable diversity, with extreme climates ranging from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts. From the beginning, humans were forced to adapt and overcome challenges that would have destroyed lesser species. The display showed early humans hunting massive creatures with primitive weapons. It showed them building shelters against harsh weather, developing tools, learning to work together in groups. What makes humans unique, Kethmos continued, is their combination of intelligence and aggression. Most intelligent species in the galaxy evolved toward cooperation as they developed. Conflict was inefficient, so it was gradually abandoned. But humans never lost their capacity for violence. Instead, they refined it. The images shifted to show human warfare through the ages. Armies clashing with swords and spears. Cities burning under siege. Weapons of increasing sophistication, each one more deadly than the last. The councilors watched battles that made even the Silithians uncomfortable. Witnessed destruction on scales they had never imagined. In their most recent major conflict, which they call World War II, humans killed approximately 70 million of their own kind in just 6 years. Kethmos let that number sink in. They developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in a single blast. They used these weapons against each other, twice. The display showed the nuclear explosions at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The mushroom clouds rose into the sky like monuments to human destructive capability. After that war, humans entered a period they called the Cold War. Two dominant powers accumulated enough nuclear weapons to destroy their entire planet many times over. For decades, they lived on the edge of extinction, held back only by the knowledge that any war would mean the end of everything. Madness, Counselor Methron whispered. Absolute madness. Perhaps, Kathmos agreed. But consider this. Despite their conflicts, humans continued to advance. They developed computers, satellites, medical technologies that extended their lifespans. They landed on their moon. They sent probes to other planets in their system, all while constantly fighting among themselves. He paused, letting the counselors absorb the information. Most species in our database show a clear pattern. They reach a certain level of technology, and then they either destroy themselves or they learn to cooperate. Humans did neither. They remained violent, remained divided, and yet they continued to progress. Their science advanced faster than any species we have ever observed. Their technology grew more sophisticated with each generation. They turned the pressure of constant conflict into fuel for innovation. The display shifted again, showing the construction of the Prometheus. Time-lapse footage captured years of work compressed into minutes. The ship grew from skeletal framework to finished vessel, each stage revealing new capabilities. The Prometheus was built in 32 Earth years, Kathmos said. By comparison, our own flagship took 97 years to complete. The humans achieved faster than light travel only recently, but once they understood the principles, they applied their entire industrial capacity to a single goal. This ship is the result. What are its capabilities? Asked Admiral Kethra, who had been summoned to the session to provide military analysis. She was Veth, like High Arbiter Sullen, tall and elegant, but her eyes held a sharpness that spoke of long experience with combat. Kathmos highlighted various sections of the ship design. The main armament consists of electromagnetic accelerators, capable of firing 1-ton projectiles at up to 40% of light speed. At that velocity, the kinetic energy alone could destroy most vessels in our fleet. They also carry approximately 3,000 missile launchers, each loaded with fusion warheads, yielding between 50 and 500 megatons. The numbers were staggering. The entire Council fleet did not carry that much destructive power combined. The point defense system is perhaps most impressive, Kathmos continued. The hull is covered with automated weapons platforms, capable of engaging thousands of targets simultaneously. Any missile or fighter that approaches within engagement range will be destroyed before it can cause damage. And the power source? Admiral Kethra pressed. Kathmos hesitated. Our analysis is incomplete. We believe they have created some form of contained stellar fusion, essentially a miniature star at the heart of their ship. It provides effectively unlimited power for all systems. We have never seen anything like it. Counselor Vren slammed his fist against his platform. Enough! I do not care how impressive their ship is. It is one vessel against the combined might of the Galactic Council. We have 300 warships at our disposal. We have technology refined over millennia. Are you telling me we cannot stop a single ship? Admiral Kethra turned to face him. Counselor, with respect, I am telling you exactly that. My tactical staff has run projections based on the available data. In a direct confrontation, we would take severe losses. Possibly unacceptable losses. Define unacceptable. In the worst-case scenarios, we lose the fleet. All of it. In the best cases, we destroy the Prometheus, but lose between 60 and 80% of our forces. The chamber erupted in chaos. Counselors shouted at each other, at Admiral Kethra, at the holographic display still showing the terrifying human vessel. Fear had given way to panic. These were beings who had never faced a genuine military threat. The idea that a single ship could destroy their combined forces was beyond their ability to accept. High Arbiter Solon raised her hand, and once again, her telepathic presence forced calm upon the assembly. Admiral, surely there must be options. strategies that could minimize our losses. There are options, Admiral Kethra confirmed, but they all carry significant risk. The humans have demonstrated capabilities we do not fully understand. Any battle plan based on incomplete information is inherently flawed. Then we negotiate, Counselor Yellen suggested. We give them what they want. What do they want? Vethril stepped forward. Based on my brief communication with their captain, I believe they want recognition. They want to be treated as equals, not as primitives to be monitored from a distance. And they want changes. What kind of changes? I do not know specifically, but the captain mentioned that they are aware of certain practices within Council space. The client worlds, the conquered territories, the things we do not discuss in this chamber. Vethril's voice was heavy. I believe the humans intend to force us to confront those issues. Silence fell over the assembly. The client worlds were a sensitive topic, a remnant of older, more brutal times when species conquered others and kept them as subordinate populations. The Council officially disapproved of such arrangements, but several powerful member species maintained them. Addressing the issue would mean challenging those species, risking the delicate balance that held the Council together. They cannot expect us to overturn millennia of tradition because they disapprove, Councilor Vren growled. They can expect whatever they wish, Yellen replied. The question is whether we are willing to risk everything to refuse them. The debate continued for hours. Proposals were made and rejected. Alliances shifted as different factions tried to gain advantage from the crisis. Some wanted war, others wanted peace at any cost. Most simply wanted the problem to go away, for the humans to disappear back into their little corner of the galaxy and stop threatening the comfortable order of things. But the Prometheus continued its approach, indifferent to their discussions. Every hour brought it closer to Council space. Every hour narrowed their window for action. Finally, as the artificial night cycle darkened the Nexus station, High Arbiter Solon called for a vote. The motion was simple: assemble the full military might of the Council at the Nexus point to confront the human vessel. Attempt one final diplomatic contact. If that failed, engage and destroy the Prometheus, whatever the cost. The vote passed, though not unanimously. Several species abstained, unwilling to commit to military action. A few voted against, arguing that any engagement was foolish. But the majority supported the motion. Pride, fear, and desperation combined to push them toward confrontation. Admiral Kethra accepted command of the combined fleet. She had 72 hours to position 300 warships at the Nexus point, to develop battle plans, to prepare for a fight that might determine the future of the galaxy. As she left the chamber to begin her work, she paused beside Counselor Vethril. "You spoke with their captain," she said quietly. "What was your impression of her?" Vethril considered the question. He remembered the calm voice, the controlled anger, the absolute certainty that had radiated through the communication. "She was not bluffing," he said finally. "Whatever happens next, she is prepared to see it through. I do not think she fears us." Admiral Kethra nodded slowly. "That is what concerns me most. A reasonable enemy can be negotiated with. A frightened enemy can be deterred. But an enemy who does not fear you—" She shook her head. "That is the most dangerous kind of all." She walked away, leaving Vethril alone in the emptying chamber. He stood there for a long time, staring at the holographic display that still showed the approaching Prometheus. Somewhere out there, Captain Helena Vance was preparing for contact with the Council fleet. She knew what was waiting for her. She knew the odds against her. And she was coming anyway. Vethril wondered what that said about humans. Were they brave or simply foolish? Did they truly believe they could defeat the combined might of 12 civilizations? Or were they counting on something else, some factor that the Council had not considered? He did not know the answer. but he suspected that they would all find out soon enough. The countdown had begun. In 72 hours, the galaxy would change forever. One way or another, nothing would ever be the same again. Admiral Kethra had commanded warships for over 60 years. She had fought in the fringe rebellions, where rogue colonies had tried to break away from Council authority. She had hunted pirates through asteroid fields that would have torn lesser ships apart. She had faced enemies who outnumbered her, outgunned her, and underestimated her. She had never lost a battle, but as she stood on the bridge of her flagship, the eternal vigilance, watching the fleet assemble around her, she felt something she had not experienced in decades. She felt afraid that the numbers were impressive. 300 warships from 12 different species, representing the combined military might of the Galactic Council. Dreadnoughts from the Silithian Empire, sleek and powerful, covered in the golden scales that were their species' trademark. Carrier groups from the Kethari Dominion, each one housing hundreds of fighter craft piloted by warriors who considered death in battle the highest honor. Heavy cruisers from the Veth Collective, their hulls embedded with the crystalline structures that allowed their telepathic crews to operate as a single mind. Destroyers, frigates, support vessels, and more, all gathered at the nexus point like a great metal fist waiting to strike dot. It should have been enough. Against any known enemy, it would have been enough 10 times over. But the enemy approaching them was not known. The enemy was human. Admiral Kethra studied the tactical display in the center of her bridge. The Prometheus appeared as a single red marker, moving steadily toward their position. In 12 hours, it would arrive. In 12 hours, she would have to make decisions that might determine the fate of billions. Her executive officer, a young Veth named Salith, approached with a datapad. "Admiral, all ships have reported ready. The fleet is at full combat readiness." "Thank you, Salith." Kethra took the datapad, but did not look at it. Her eyes remained fixed on that red marker. "Have our analysts completed their assessment of the human vessel's capabilities?" Salith's expression darkened. "They have, Admiral. The results are not encouraging. Tell me." "The Prometheus appears to be a purpose-built warship, designed from the beginning for combat against numerically superior forces. Its armor is composed of materials we cannot fully analyze, but preliminary scans suggest it can withstand direct hits from our main weapons. Its point defense network is the most comprehensive we have ever observed. Our fighters will be destroyed before they can get close enough to launch torpedoes." Kethra nodded slowly. She had expected as much. "What about their weapons?" "Their kinetic accelerators have longer range than anything in our fleet. They can engage us before we can effectively return fire. Their missile systems appear to be independently targeted, meaning they can engage multiple ships simultaneously without reducing accuracy. And the power core?" Salith hesitated. "Our scientists believe it may be capable of powering a directed energy weapon of unprecedented magnitude. They call it a Helios Lance, a weapon powered by a contained star," Kethra murmured. "How poetic. Admiral, I must speak freely." "You always do, Salith. That is why I value you." The young officer straightened. "This battle cannot be won through conventional tactics. We outnumber them 300 to 1, but numbers mean nothing if we cannot land hits. We need a different approach. What do you suggest?" "Negotiation. True negotiation, not the political posturing the Council has attempted so far. We need to understand what the humans actually want and determine if there is a path to peace." Kethra turned to face her executive officer. "The Council has already voted for confrontation. They will not accept anything less than the destruction of the Prometheus or its unconditional surrender." "Then the Council is wrong," Salith said flatly. "Forgive me, Admiral, but I have studied the data on human history. These are not beings who surrender. These are beings who fight to the last individual. If we force them into a corner, they will make us pay a price we cannot afford. I know. Kethra sighed deeply. I have read the same reports. I understand the same risks. But I am a soldier, Salaith. I follow orders, even orders that will lead to catastrophe. The question hung in the air between them. It was the question that every military officer faced at some point in their career. The line between duty and conscience, between obedience and responsibility. Before Kethra could answer, a communication alert sounded. The sensor officer announced that a transmission was being received from the approaching human vessel. On screen, Kethra commanded. The main display flickered, and then a face appeared. It was the first time any of them had seen a human up close. Captain Helena Vance looked back at them with eyes that were startlingly intense. She was smaller than Kethra had expected, her frame compact and unimposing. Her hair was dark, cut short in a practical style. She wore a uniform of deep blue, decorated with symbols that presumably indicated her rank and achievements. But it was her expression that captured Kethra's attention. There was no fear in it, no uncertainty, only calm determination and something else, something that might have been sadness. Admiral Kethra, the human captain said. I am Captain Helena Vance of the Earth vessel Prometheus. I believe we should talk. Kethra stepped forward, positioning herself in front of the camera that would transmit her image to the human ship. Captain Vance, I am surprised you reached out. Your previous communications suggested you were not interested in negotiation. I am not interested in the kind of negotiation your council has offered, Vance replied. Terms of surrender, demands for submission, threats disguised as diplomacy. That is not negotiation. That is bullying. Then what would you call true negotiation? A conversation between equals. An honest exchange of concerns and interests. A genuine attempt to find common ground. Vance paused. I know your fleet is preparing to attack us. I know your orders are to destroy the Prometheus or force our surrender. I am contacting you directly because I believe you understand something that your council does not. And what is that? That this does not have to end in blood. That there is a better way. Kethra felt the eyes of her bridge crew on her. They were watching, waiting to see how she would respond. This was a moment that would define her legacy, perhaps the most important moment of her career. Captain Vance, I appreciate your desire for peace. But you must understand our position. You have entered council space with a warship of unprecedented power. You have refused to comply with our laws. You have threatened to force us to listen. How are we supposed to interpret your actions as anything other than aggression? Vance's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something that might have been frustration. Admiral, humanity has watched the stars for thousands of years. We dreamed of finding other intelligent life, of joining a community of civilizations. When we finally developed the technology to reach out, do you know what we found? A galaxy ruled by a council that had known about us for nearly a century and chosen to do nothing. A civilization that watched us struggle and suffer and nearly destroy ourselves and never offered a single word of guidance or support. Non-interference is standard protocol, Kethra replied. We do not contact developing species until they are ready. Ready by whose standards? You waited until we built a ship that scared you. You only acknowledged our existence when you had no choice. That is not non-interference. That is arrogance. The word struck Kethra harder than she expected. She had always accepted the council's policies without question. They were ancient traditions, refined over millennia. But hearing them described from the outside, from the perspective of a species that had been on the receiving end, she could see how they might appear differently. Perhaps we have made mistakes, she admitted. But that does not justify threatening our civilization with war. I am not threatening war, Vance said firmly. I am demanding change. There is a difference. The difference being, War is destruction without purpose. What I am proposing is destruction with purpose. We do not want to conquer your council. We do not want to rule your space. We want to end the injustices that exist within your system. The client worlds, where entire species are kept as servants. The conquered territories, where populations live under occupation. The slave markets that the Council pretends not to see. These things are wrong, Admiral. They violate every principle that civilized beings should hold sacred. Kethra felt a chill run through her. The human captain was not just challenging the Council's authority. She was challenging its morality. And the worst part was that she was not wrong. The practices she described did exist. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. They simply chose not to discuss them. Those are internal matters, Kethra said, though her voice lacked conviction. They do not concern outsiders. Everything concerns us, Admiral. We are part of this galaxy now. We will not stand by and allow atrocities to continue simply because tradition says they are acceptable. Vance leaned forward, her eyes burning with intensity. Let me be clear about our position. The Prometheus will enter Council space. We will proceed to the Nexus station. We will present our demands to the full Council. If they agree to meaningful reforms, we will become partners, allies in building a better galaxy. If they refuse, we will leave. But if anyone tries to stop us, if anyone fires on our vessel, we will defend ourselves. And I promise you, Admiral, you do not want to see what that looks like. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Salaith was the first to speak. Admiral, I believe she was sincere. They do not want war. They want reform. They want revolution, Kethra corrected. They want to overturn everything the Council has built. That is not something the Council will accept. Then what do? Kethra stared at the tactical display for a long moment. The red marker continued its steady approach. In less than 12 hours, it would be in weapons range. She would have to make a choice. The orders from the Council were clear. Stop the Prometheus. Force its surrender or destroy it. Protect the established order at any cost. But Captain Vance's words echoed in her mind. The client worlds. The conquered territories. The slave markets. Were those things worth protecting? Was the established order worth dying for if the order itself was corrupt? Open a channel to the fleet, she said finally. All ships. The communication officer acknowledged. A moment later, Kethra's voice was being broadcast to 300 vessels and hundreds of thousands of crew members. This is Admiral Kethra. In approximately 12 hours, we will engage the human vessel Prometheus. Our orders are to stop them by any means necessary. I will not lie to you. This will be a difficult battle. The enemy is powerful, more powerful than anything we have faced before. Some of us will not survive. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But I want you to understand what we are fighting for. The humans have come to challenge our way of life. They say we are corrupt, that we tolerate injustice, that we have failed to live up to our own ideals. Perhaps they're right. Perhaps our council is imperfect. But it is ours. It is the civilization our ancestors built over 10,000 years. And if we allow a single ship to dig terms to us, if we show weakness in the face of this challenge, then everything our ancestors fought for will be lost. She took a deep breath. Make peace with your gods. Say goodbye to those you love. And when the moment comes, fight with everything you have. For the Council, for the galaxy, for each other. She ended the transmission and turned back to the tactical display. The red marker was closer now. So much closer. Salaith approached her quietly. That was a good speech, Admiral. It was a necessary speech, Kethra replied. Whether it was good remains to be seen. Do you believe what you said? That our civilization is worth dying for? Kethra considered the question carefully. I believe that some things are worth dying for. Honor, duty, the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. Whether our council deserves that sacrifice. She shook her head. Ask me again when this is over. The hours passed slowly. The fleet made its final preparations. Weapons were charged, shields calibrated, battle stations manned. The machinery of war ground into motion, unstoppable once started. And through it all, the Prometheus continued its approach. One ship against 300. One species against 12. One crew against the might of an ancient civilization. Admiral Kethra stood at her post and waited for the storm to break. Has ever been. The communication paused. When Vance spoke again, her voice was softer, almost gentle. But we do not want war. We never did. We came here to talk, to find a better way. We came here because we believe the galaxy deserves better than what the Council has given it. And we are willing to fight for that belief, but only if we are forced to. Admiral Kethra stared at the tactical display. The red marker representing the Prometheus had not moved. It sat there among the debris of her fleet, patient and powerful, waiting for her response. She thought about her orders. She thought about her duty. She thought about everything she had been taught about honor and obedience and the chain of command. Then she thought about the faces of the crew members who had died in the past few minutes. She thought about the ships that had been reduced to fragments. She thought about the futility of continuing a battle that could not be won. All vessels, she said slowly, stand down. Cease all offensive operations. Salaith looked at her with shock. Admiral, the Council's orders. The Council's orders were based on the assumption that we could win this fight. We cannot. Continuing to attack will only result in more deaths. She met her executive officer's eyes. I will not send more of our people to die for nothing. The fleet obeyed. Weapons powered down. Ships that had been maneuvering for attack runs came to a halt. The silence of space, briefly interrupted by the chaos of battle, returned. Thank you, Admiral, Captain Vance said. I know that was not easy. It was not, Kethra agreed. What happens now? Now, we proceed to the Nexus station. We will present our proposals to the Council, and they will listen. And if they refuse your demands? There was a pause. Then we leave. We return to Earth. We continue developing our technology and building our fleet. And in a generation, perhaps two, we come back. Not with one ship, but with 1,000. Not to demand change, but to impose it. Vance's voice hardened. I truly hope it does not come to that. But if the Council chooses pride over progress, if they refuse to acknowledge the wrongs they have permitted, then we will do what must be done. The communication ended. Admiral Kethra watched as the Prometheus resumed its course toward the Nexus station. The surviving ships of her fleet parted before it like waves before a ship. No one tried to stop it. No one dared. Salaith approached her quietly. Admiral, there will be consequences for this. The Council will not be pleased. The Council can express their displeasure to me directly, Kethra replied. I will not apologize for saving lives. Do you think the humans will succeed? Do you think the Council will accept their demands? Kethra considered the question. She thought about the old powers that dominated the Council chambers, the ancient species who had grown comfortable with their privileges. She thought about the client worlds and the conquered territories and all the injustices that had been allowed to continue because addressing them was difficult. I do not know, she admitted, but I think the galaxy is about to change, one way or another. She turned and walked toward her ready room. Behind her, the bridge crew began the grim work of assessing casualties and coordinating rescue operations. Around them, The debris of the battle drifted through space, a monument to the day the galaxy learned to fear humanity. And somewhere ahead, the Prometheus continued its journey. One ship, one crew, one species that had looked upon the stars and decided that they could be better. The demonstration was over. The real negotiations were about to begin. The Prometheus dropped out of faster-than-light travel at precisely the moment the tactical computers had predicted. 1 second, the space ahead of the Council fleet was empty. The next, the human warship was there, hanging in the void like a predator that had finally cornered its prey. Admiral Kethra felt her heart skip when she saw it with her own eyes. The holographic images had not done it justice. The Prometheus was massive, yes, but it was also beautiful in a way that only weapons of war could be. Every line of its hull spoke of purpose. Every surface was covered with devices that promised destruction to anything foolish enough to come close. The communication channel crackled. Captain Vance's voice filled the bridge. "Admiral Kethra, this is your final opportunity. Stand down your fleet and allow us to pass. We will proceed to the Nexus station and present our proposals to the Council. No one needs to die today." Kethra closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her crew, of the thousands of beings aboard the ships around her who were about to fight for their civilization. She thought of the Council, with all its flaws and compromises. She thought of her duty, the oath she had sworn when she first put on the uniform. She opened her eyes. "Captain Vance, by the authority of the Galactic Council, I order you to surrender your vessel. This is your final warning. Failure to comply will result in the use of lethal force." There was a pause before Vance responded. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with regret. "I had hoped it would not come to this. But we are prepared. Do what you must, Admiral. And remember, you were the ones who chose this path." The channel went silent. Kethra turned to her tactical officer. "All ships, engage at will." The battle of the Nexus Point began. The Council fleet opened fire with everything it had. Plasma lances from the Silithian dreadnoughts cut through space like beams of liquid fire. Graviton torpedoes from the Kethari carriers spiraled toward the human ship, each one carrying enough destructive power to crack a small moon. Energy weapons, missile barrages, kinetic projectiles, 300 ships, unleashed their full arsenals in a single coordinated strike. The space around the Prometheus became a hell of light and fury. Explosions bloomed across its shields in continuous succession. For a moment, it seemed impossible that anything could survive such an onslaught. Then the reality of human engineering became clear that the Prometheus did not evade. It did not retreat. It simply absorbed the punishment with contemptuous ease. Its shields, layers of energy that the Council scientists could not fully understand, flickered and reformed under the bombardment. The point defense grid activated, and thousands of incoming projectiles vanished in clouds of superheated debris. Missiles that had traveled light seconds to reach their target were destroyed mere meters from the hull. Admiral Kethra watched in disbelief as her fleet's opening salvo failed to leave so much as a scratch on the human vessel. "All weapons, continue firing," she ordered. "Target their shield generators. Concentrate all power on a single point." The fleet adjusted its aim, focusing everything on a section of the Prometheus's starboard flank. The effect was like trying to burn through a mountain with a candle. The shields held. The ship held. Nothing worked out, and then the Prometheus returned fire. The first shots came from the kinetic accelerators mounted along the warship's spine. There was no warning, no visible discharge, just a sudden flicker of motion sensors followed by impacts that defied comprehension. The projectiles were too fast to track, too small to detect, and too powerful to survive. They punched through energy shields like they did not exist. They tore through armor plating like paper. They carved paths of destruction through ships that had been built to withstand anything the galaxy could throw at them. The Silithian, dreadnought Unconquerable, was hit by 3 rounds in rapid succession. The first destroyed its main reactor. The second vaporized the bridge. The third split the vessel in half. The entire ship, one of the most powerful warships in the Council fleet, was reduced to expanding debris in less than 2 seconds. More shots followed. More ships died. The Cathari carriers launched their fighters. Thousands of small craft piloted by warriors who had trained their entire lives for this moment. They swarmed toward the Prometheus like angry insects, firing everything they had. The human ship's point defense grid responded with mechanical precision. Beams of light swept across the approaching formation, and fighters vanished by the dozen. They were not destroyed individually, they were eliminated in waves. Entire squadrons gone in the blink of an eye. Kethra watched the tactical display with growing horror. Red markers representing Council ships were disappearing faster than she could process. The fleet's formation was breaking apart as captains panicked, abandoned their positions, tried desperately to escape the killing zone. "Admiral, we are losing cohesion," Solaith reported, his voice strained with fear. "The 7th and 9th battle groups have lost command authority. The Silithian contingent is attempting to withdraw. Order them to hold position," Kethra snapped. "They are not responding." Solaith stopped mid-sentence as the tactical display updated. The Silithian flagship, the Golden Wrath, had been hit. Its massive form was drifting, venting atmosphere from a dozen breaches. Escape pods launched in desperate streams as the crew abandoned ship. The battle had lasted 4 minutes. The Council fleet had lost 47 ships. They had not inflicted a single point of significant damage on the Prometheus dot. And then, everything changed. Prometheus stopped firing. For a long moment, nothing happened. The surviving Council ships continued their barrage, though with visibly less enthusiasm. The human warship sat motionless in space, its weapons silent, its shields still absorbing everything thrown at them. "Captain," Vance's voice came through the communication channel again. "Cease fire. All vessels, cease fire." The authority in her voice was absolute. Despite themselves, despite their fear and their rage, the Council captains obeyed. The weapons fire trailed off until only the occasional nervous shot disturbed the silence. "Admiral Kethra," Vance continued, "look at your tactical display. Count your losses. Then look at ours." Kethra did not need to look. She knew the numbers. 47 ships destroyed. Hundreds more damaged. Thousands of crew members dead or dying. And the Prometheus remained untouched. "We could have destroyed your entire fleet," Vance said. "We could have killed everyone here. We chose not to. Do you understand what that means?" Kethra understood. She understood with terrible clarity. "This was a demonstration," she whispered. "Yes, we needed you to see what you are dealing with. We needed you to understand that military force cannot stop us. Not your fleet. Not 100 fleets. We have spent our entire existence preparing for war, Admiral. We are better at it than any species." The Prometheus arrived at the Nexus station 3 days after the battle. It had traveled slowly, almost leisurely, giving the Council time to receive reports from the survivors and understand the full scope of what had happened. By the time the human warship took position in orbit around the station, every being in Council space knew that something unprecedented had occurred. 47 ships destroyed. Over 8,000 crew members dead. The combined military might of 12 civilizations, humiliated by a single vessel from a species that had been dismissed as primitive and violent. The galaxy was watching. The galaxy was waiting. Captain Helena Vance stood in her quarters aboard the Prometheus, preparing for the most important moment of her life. She had removed her battle uniform and replaced it with something more appropriate for diplomacy, a simple dark suit, unadorned except for the small flag of Earth embroidered over her heart. She studied herself in the mirror and wondered if she was ready for what came next. A chime at her door announced a visitor. She called for entry, and Commander Chen Wei stepped inside. Her first officer was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen too many battles. He had served with her for 15 years, through the construction of the Prometheus and the long journey to this moment. "The shuttle is ready," he said. "The Council has agreed to receive you in the Chamber of Stars." Vance nodded. "How many guards did they request?" "They asked that you come alone. No weapons, no security detail. They want to show that they are not intimidated." A small smile crossed Vance's face. "They are terrified, but they do not want to admit it." "I can respect that. Captain, are you sure about this?" "Walking into that chamber alone, surrounded by species who have every reason to hate us, it is dangerous. Everything worth doing is dangerous. Wei, if I wanted safety, I would have stayed on Earth." She turned to face him. "Besides, what are they going to do? Kill me?" The Prometheus would reduce their station to atoms within seconds. They know that. This is not about physical threat. This is about presence. Chen Wei studied her for a long moment. They had served together long enough that words were not always necessary. He understood what she was trying to accomplish, and he understood the risks. "The crew believes in you," he said finally. "Whatever happens in there, know that we are proud of what we have done." "We have not done anything yet," Vance replied. "The battle was easy. This is the hard part." She straightened her jacket one final time and headed for the shuttle bay. The flight from the Prometheus to the Nexus station took less than 10 minutes. Vance spent the time reviewing her notes, though she had memorized everything weeks ago. The demand she would present, the evidence she would offer, the arguments she would make. She had prepared for this moment her entire life. The shuttle docked at a private port, away from the crowds that had gathered to witness the arrival of the first human in Council space. An escort of Veth guards met her at the airlock. They were tall and pale, their eyes filled with an emotion that might have been curiosity or fear or hatred. Vance could not tell. She had not yet learned to read alien expressions. They led her through corridors of shimmering crystal, past observation windows that showed the vastness of space and the distant shapes of ships still arriving from across the galaxy. The Council had summoned everyone who could make it in time. This would be the largest gathering in generations. Finally, they reached the Chamber of Stars. The doors opened, and Vance stepped inside. Thought the sight that greeted her was overwhelming. The chamber was an enormous sphere, its walls made of transparent crystal that revealed the stars beyond. Platforms floated at various levels, each one occupied by representatives from one of the Council's member species. Thousands of eyes turned toward her as she entered. Thousands of beings watched the human who had humiliated their civilization walk calmly into their most sacred space. High, Arbiter Solon rose from her platform at the center of the chamber. Her voice echoed through the space, amplified by hidden speakers. "Captain Helena Vance of Earth, you stand before the Galactic Council to answer for your actions. You have violated our borders. You have attacked our fleet. You have killed our citizens. What do you have to say for yourself?" Vance stopped at the center of the chamber, standing on a circular platform that floated beneath her like solid light. She looked up at the assembled representatives and felt no fear. She had come too far to be afraid now. "I, Arbiter, members of the Council," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I come before you not as a conqueror, but as a messenger. Not to demand submission, but to offer partnership. Not to destroy your civilization, but to help it become what it should always have been." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Selene raised her hand for silence. You speak of partnership while your warship hangs over our station like a threat. You speak of help while the debris of our fleet still drifts through space. Forgive us if we find your words difficult to believe. I understand your suspicion, Vance replied. I would feel the same in your position. But I ask you to listen with open minds. What I have to say may be difficult to hear, but it is the truth. She activated a device on her wrist, and holographic images began to appear around her. They showed scenes from across Council space places that most of the representatives had never seen, or had chosen not to see. The Cathari client worlds, Vance said, as images of industrial facilities appeared. 3 billion beings who labor their entire lives to fuel the Dominion's economy. They have no rights, no representation, no hope of freedom. Their children are born into servitude. Their elderly are disposed of when they can no longer work. This is not partnership. This is slavery. Councillor Vethril shifted uncomfortably on his platform. The Cathari representatives exchanged nervous glances. More images appeared. The conquered territories of the Silithian Empire. Entire species subjugated for generations. Their cultures destroyed, their histories erased, their populations reduced to second-class citizens in their own homes. The Council knows this. The Council has always known this. And the Council has done nothing. Councillor Vren's scales flushed with anger, but he remained silent. The images continued. Slave markets operating openly in certain sectors. Forced labor camps hidden on remote moons. Medical experiments conducted on unwilling subjects. Genocides that had been covered up for centuries. Each image was accompanied by data, evidence, testimony, proof that could not be denied. We did not come here to lecture you, Vance said when the presentation ended. We did not come here to claim moral superiority. Humanity has committed terrible acts throughout our history. We have enslaved each other. We have murdered each other. We have committed crimes that haunt us to this day. We are not innocent. She paused, letting her words sink in. But we have also grown. We have learned. We have looked at the worst parts of ourselves and decided to be better. It took us thousands of years and cost millions of lives, but we eventually understood that a civilization built on suffering cannot endure. That power without justice is tyranny. That peace without equality is merely oppression with a prettier name. She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as she could. The Galactic Council has existed for 10,000 years. You have maintained stability. You have prevented large-scale wars. You have created systems of trade and communication that benefit countless species. These are genuine achievements, and we respect them. But you have also allowed injustice to flourish in the shadows. You have tolerated cruelty because addressing it would be inconvenient. You have built a civilization that serves the powerful at the expense of the weak. High Arbiter Solen's expression was unreadable. And what do you propose we do about it, Captain? We propose reform, Vance answered. Genuine, meaningful reform. The abolition of client species systems. The liberation of conquered territories. The closure of slave markets and forced labor facilities. Independent oversight of member species to ensure compliance with basic standards of dignity and rights. You ask us to overturn millennia of tradition, Solen said. To fundamentally restructure our civilization based on the demands of a species we met only days ago. I ask you to live up to the ideals you already claim to hold. Your charter speaks of equality among species. Your laws prohibit the practices I have described. The problem is not your principles, it is your failure to enforce them. The chamber fell silent. The representatives looked at each other, at Vance, at the images that still floated around her. Some showed anger. Some showed shame. Some showed fear of what accepting these demands would mean. Councillor Yellen of the Miri Consensus spoke up. "Captain Vance, if we refuse your proposals, what then?" Vance met the small being's luminous eyes. "Then we leave. We return to Earth and continue our development. We build more ships like the Prometheus. We reach out to other species who share our values. And when the time is right, we return not to negotiate, but to impose the changes that should have been made long ago." "That sounds like a threat," Vren growled. "It is a promise," Vance replied calmly. "We would rather work with you than against you. We would rather be partners than conquerors. But make no mistake, the injustices in this galaxy will end. The only question is whether they end through cooperation or through force." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Representatives argued, accused, defended, proposed alternatives. Some demanded that Vance be arrested, that the Prometheus be attacked with everything the Council could muster. Others called for immediate acceptance of the human demands. Most fell somewhere in between, uncertain of how to respond to a situation they had never imagined. Through it all, Vance remained calm. She answered questions honestly, even when the truth was uncomfortable. She acknowledged humanity's own failings, refused to pretend that her species was morally perfect. She presented evidence when challenged, admitted ignorance when appropriate, and never once lost her composure. Finally, as the artificial night cycle began to darken the crystal walls of the chamber, High Arbiter Solon called for a vote. The motion was simple: accept the human proposals in principle, and form a joint committee to work out the details of implementation. It was not everything Vance had asked for, but it was a beginning. The vote was close. Several species abstained, unwilling to commit either way. The Silithians and Kethari voted against, as expected. But enough votes fell on the other side. The motion passed. Vance felt a wave of relief wash over her, though she did not let it show on her face. This was only the first step. The real work would take years, perhaps decades. There would be resistance, setbacks, compromises that left a bitter taste. But the door had been opened. Change had begun. Selene approached her as the chamber began to empty. The High Arbiter moved slowly, her tall form casting long shadows in the fading light. "You have accomplished something remarkable today, Captain. I am not certain whether to admire you or fear you." "Fear is acceptable," Vance replied, "as long as it leads to action. The reforms you demand will not be easy. Many powerful interests will resist. There may be violence, civil unrest, even war. There will be difficulties," Vance agreed. "But difficulty is not an excuse for inaction. The suffering we saw today has gone on too long. Every day that passes without change is another day of injustice." Selene studied her for a long moment. "You truly believe you can change the galaxy?" It was not a question, but Vance answered anyway. "I believe that change is possible when beings of conscience demand it. I believe that the powerful can learn to be just, and the weak can learn to be free. I believe that the galaxy deserves better than what it has been given." She paused. "And I believe that if we fail, it will not be because change was impossible, only because we did not try hard enough." She turned and walked toward the exit. At the doorway, she stopped and looked back. "We built the Prometheus in 30 years, she said. "Imagine what we can build when we work together." She left the Chamber of Stars and returned to her ship. Behind her, the representatives of 12 civilizations began the slow, difficult process of reimagining their galaxy. The Prometheus remained in orbit around the Nexus station for 3 more weeks, while negotiations continued and agreements were finalized. When it finally departed, it carried something more valuable than weapons or technology. It carried hope. The humans had come not to conquer, but to challenge. Not to destroy, but to rebuild. They had looked upon a galaxy that had grown comfortable with its own darkness and demanded that it become something better. And against all odds, against millennia of tradition and the resistance of the powerful, they had succeeded. The story would not end there, of course. Change is never quick or clean. There would be struggles ahead, conflicts that would test the fragile alliance between humans and the Council. There would be moments of despair when it seemed like nothing would ever truly improve. But on that day, standing in the Chamber of Stars, something fundamental had shifted. The galaxy had been shown a different way, and it could never go back to pretending that the old way was good enough. Captain Helena Vance watched the stars stream past as the Prometheus began its journey home. She thought about everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. Behind her, the galaxy was waking up, and humanity was just getting started.